Very short answer. 1. What does the magnifying glass on each page number stand for? Careful observation, noticing patterns and small details that others might miss. 2. What does the compass stand for? Direction, choosing the right models, asking the right questions, and knowing the limits of where ideas apply. 3. Define a model in science. A simplified version of a real system that keeps only what is important for the question being asked and leaves the rest out. 4. Why is a kilogram universal? Because measurements use agreed international standards, so it means the same everywhere, protecting both fair trade and scientific accuracy. 5. What does the symbol c stand for, and where does it come from? It stands for the speed of light and comes from the Latin word celeritas, meaning speed. 6. State one example of a scientific law. Newton's laws of motion, e.g., the jerk you feel when a bus suddenly stops. 7. Give one prediction example from biology mentioned in the chapter. How breathing changes while running. Short answer. 1. Explain the difference between a law and a theory with examples. A law describes a regular pattern in nature, usually as a rule or formula, but does not explain its cause. For example, Newton's laws of motion. A theory goes further and explains why the pattern happens based on a large body of evidence. For example, atomic theory explains how molecules form. In short, a law tells us what happens, while a theory tells us why. 2. Why does science use words in a very precise way? In everyday speech, people use words loosely and still understand each other, but science cannot afford that confusion. The same word must mean the same thing to everyone, so that experiments can be fairly compared and a result found in one lab can be understood and trusted anywhere in the world. 3. Using the cricket 6 example, explain what to include and ignore in a model. The question is whether the ball crosses the boundary without hitting the ground. We ignore the bat brand, ball color, and grass on the field because they don't change the answer. We include the mass of the ball and the speed and direction of the hit because these decide where the ball lands. Small effects like spin and air resistance can be added only if we need more accuracy. 4. Why is it a strength, not a weakness, that scientific ideas can be discarded? No idea in science is sacred. If stronger evidence appears, even a famous idea can be improved or dropped. This willingness to change in the face of evidence is exactly what makes science trustworthy. The ideas that survive have been tested again and again. 5. Explain how the aircraft fuel disaster shows the importance of units. A plane needed 22,300 kilograms of fuel, but the crew used density in pounds per litre instead of kilograms per litre. Since a pound and a kilogram are very different masses, the plane ended up about 15,000 litres short and had to glide to an emergency landing. It shows that units are not a small detail. Using one agreed SI system can be a matter of life and death. Long answer 1. Making a model means deliberately ignoring details. Explain this idea with examples from different branches of science. The natural world is far too complex to study in full detail, so science uses models, simplified pictures that keep only what matters for a particular question. Building a model always involves making assumptions and choosing which details to leave out on purpose. In physics, a moving car is treated as a single point. In chemistry, atoms are drawn as spheres joined by bonds. In biology, a cell is shown as a clean diagram of its key parts. In earth science, the Earth is treated as a smooth, layered sphere. We also ignore details to isolate effects. For example, ignoring air resistance to see the pure effect of gravity, or ignoring individual cells to understand how the heart pumps blood as a whole organ. Leaving out a detail is wrong only if it changes the answer. A skilled scientist chooses which details to drop, and that judgment is a core scientific skill. 2. Describe the work of Meghnad Saha and explain why it is a great example of model building. Meghnad Saha studied the light coming from stars, an impossibly complex system. Instead of trying to model every atom and reaction, he made bold simplifications. He treated the matter in a star as a hot gas, ignored many complex processes, and focused only on temperature, pressure, and how atoms form ions. This stripped an overwhelming problem down to a few key quantities he could describe with equations. His model produced a powerful, testable result, that the color of a star is deeply connected to its temperature, which scientists still use today. It shows that a well-chosen simplification is not a shortcut that loses truth. It can lead to real, lasting discoveries. This is model building at the highest level. 3. Explain the difference between laws, theories, and principles, and discuss why a scientific theory is not just a guess. Science organizes knowledge using laws, theories, and principles, and each means something different. A law describes a regular pattern in nature, often as a rule or formula, for example, Newton's laws of motion. A theory explains why that pattern happens, supported by lots of evidence, for example, atomic theory. A principle is a broad idea that applies across many situations, for example, conservation of energy. In everyday talk, it's just a theory suggests a wild guess, but in science, a theory is among the strongest kinds of knowledge, an explanation built on careful testing and critical examination over many years. Importantly, all scientific ideas stay open to correction. When better evidence arrives, they can be improved or replaced. This openness is what makes science reliable, because the ideas that survive have been tested repeatedly. 4. Science values careful reasoning over exact numbers. Explain using the ideas of prediction and estimation. Well-established laws, theories, and models let scientists predict what will happen in new conditions. How far a football travels, how much CO2 a reaction produces, or how breathing changes while running. These are not guesses, but reasoned expectations based on evidence, which is why they can be defended and explained. When a prediction matches observation, confidence grows. When it doesn't, scientists re-examine their assumptions rather than the evidence. Alongside prediction, science uses estimation as a sanity check. Understand the situation, identify the quantities that matter, and make a rough estimate to see if an answer is sensible. For example, about 20,000 breaths a day times roughly half a litre each, approximate 10,000 litres of air. The exact figure matters less than knowing the answer is reasonable. Not 10 litres, not a million. Both habits show that science is about careful, evidence-based thinking, not blind calculation. Higher order thinking, HOTS. 1. Varsha says, "It will rain because the clouds look dark." How would a scientist turn this into a testable question? A scientist would replace the vague yes-no claim with something measurable, asking for evidence and past patterns, such as the humidity, wind, and temperature trends, and what those readings were the last time it actually rained. Turning a vague claim into measurable data we can check is exactly what makes a claim scientific. 2. Why can a weather forecast for tomorrow be fairly reliable, while a forecast 3 weeks away is not? Weather depends on many changing factors: temperature, pressure, humidity, and wind, and tiny differences grow larger over time. A small error today can snowball into a big error weeks later, so short-term forecasts stay accurate while long-term ones become unreliable. 3. How does the myth "food becomes harmful during an eclipse" collapse under scientific questioning. An eclipse is just shadow play, asking testable questions. Does the temperature change? Does any chemical reaction occur? Does food spoil simply by sitting in a shadow? Shows that nothing physically changes the food. Since there is no mechanism to make it harmful, the claim collapses. It is a model of applying scientific thinking to everyday life. 4. Science has no real borders. Justify this statement with an example. Nature does not come divided into subjects. Physics, chemistry, biology, and earth science are human-made divisions made only to organize knowledge. Real problems need several branches working together. For example, designing a simple face mask draws on physics, airflow and filtering, chemistry, materials, biology, germs and breathing, and maths all at once. Revision tip. Explore each answer through the magnifying glass of evidence, guided by the compass of curiosity. Understand the idea first, then memorize the wording. Happy exploring!